What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Triple H podcast. Today, we are starting our division previews, starting with my favorite division, the Atlantic Division, the division that homes the Celtics. Guys, Steve, Jake, myself, like I said, we're ready to break down the start of our division preview. Started with my favorite, Jake and Steve. Where does the Atlantic Division rank for you guys among favorites?
Fifth or
Wow.
sixth.
Come on.
I mean,
Dang.
I said it before. The reason
Okay.
I have nothing personally against these teams. I think it's the most straightforward one. I think it's the least interesting, probably, of the six divisions. And that's why, I don't have anything against these teams. I'll be honest. I don't love a lot of them. I don't really ever find myself rooting for Philly or the Knicks. The Celtics, I tried to become Stevie Boston last year. They ripped my heart out. I'll still give them another chance because, Dunny's an all right guy, and Jaylen Brown is one of my favorite basketball players to watch. But, in terms of, overall division, and Pascal Siakam, most underrated player in basketball, he's in this division too. Got to give him his flowers. But overall, I think it's 5 or 6 for me. Like the Atlantic, I just think it's going to be straightforward. I think today we're going to go through the Atlantic and we're going to agree on a lot of teams where I think going forward, the weeks going forward, we're going to see a lot more, I guess, not argumentative points, but just, differentiating on different teams than just the teams in the Atlantic. Because I look at right now and not much has changed from last year with these 5 teams, couple pieces here and there. But I look at the standings and I go, I could see 1 through 5 being in the exact same order as it was last season.
My read on the Atlantic favorite. I mean, what are we talking about? Favorite, like the teams I like. Do I enjoy watching? Enjoying watching them. The only team I like watching out of this is the Celtics and OG Anunoby. The rest of these teams, I can't stand the Knicks. I can't stand the Sixers. My dad was a Nets fan. He's given up on the Nets now, understandably. Brooklyn run, not been so great. New Jersey Nets. So I don't really like any of these teams. So yeah, I feel like I'm more with you, Steve. The Southeast would be my last. The Southeast is always the least interesting.
It's getting interesting this year.
We'll say 4. We'll say 4. I'll put them ahead of the Northwest as well, even if our guy Jokic is in there, because I'm really not watching a lot of Northwest Division basketball a lot. But maybe the Thunder, I don't know. See, this is why it's hard, because I love there's weird teams.
Why I'm not putting them.
I love all these weird teams. The Pacific, it would have been a while ago, and then LeBron joined the Lakers, and that just flipped it on its head. So sorry, Dunny. Yeah, it's really the other team's fault, though. Mostly the Knicks, if I'm being honest.
Oh, it's absolutely other teams. Celtics the only thing keeping this division from the basement.
It'd be last.
It's the only team I like to watch from this division.
And I'm cool with that. And I can agree with that. I do call this division my favorite strictly because the Celtics are in it. But that's neither here nor there. We will be previewing this division. First, we got some news and notes to take care of. Not much this week. Mostly 2 signings, and they happened both last night. If you're listening to this live, it is Wednesday. If you're listening to this afterwards, this happened Tuesday nights. The signings we're speaking of, but Christian Wood signs a 2-year deal with the Lakers. It seems like when we saw this bit of news, it was kind of like finally someone signed this guy. It was a little weird that, or at least in my opinion, that Christian Wood hadn't been signed all summer. Then finally inks a deal with the Lakers, which, I mean, the Lakers did it again. It seems like they have another nice signing. You can't really poke fun at the Lakers as much as you could this time last year. They seem to be doing the right things this summer. What did you guys think of the Christian Wood deal for the Lakers?
I mean, I'll keep it short and sweet. My thoughts on Christian Wood. He was an absolute disaster in Dallas, and he's someone that I felt was not a very efficient player, but also a lazy player. So maybe a change of scenery can help him. But it just felt like when Dallas had their struggles, it was like Wood didn't want to step up. And when they got him, they brought him in to be a guy who was supposed to be one of those guys to step up to help take a little bit of weight off of Luka's back. And it was kind of the opposite. When things were going right, Christian Wood looked like a great basketball player, kind of what we saw, flashes of in Houston. But it just, I don't know if Christian Wood has that dog in him. If I'm gonna be completely honest, I don't
no dog.
This type of guy is someone who's really gonna step up when things are bad, or he's someone you're gonna need. So the signing's fine to me, Dunny, but I think Wood is like a 10 to 15 minutes off the bench player for the Lakers. He's just he's just a name at this point. I think he has a lot of talent, a lot of potential, but I also think he's a lazy player who's just not willing to get better.
I was gonna flame Christian Wood too, so I'm in full agreement. The Lakers got him because he wanted to live in LA. That's the reason, more than anything.
Pretty much.
Yeah,
he's gonna have some nice moments too. Don't get me wrong, like especially with playing with LeBron, like there's gonna be some games where Christian Wood looks, and AD too, be like his life is gonna be easier than it's ever been next to those two, and there's gonna be some games where he, I don't know, puts up like 28, shoots 5 of 8 from 3, and everybody's like, oh man, can't wait to see this lineup unlocked in the playoffs. But when Steve said he has no dog, that's the fullest truth. So it's nice. It's honestly, it's a smart signing in that fact, though, that it's going to help the scoring load for AD and LeBron during the regular season, so those guys can kind of have more rest for the playoffs. I feel like that's the biggest benefit.
Yeah, I mean that totally makes sense. It's probably more a depth piece than anything for the Lakers, but it seems it was a win-win because I think you're right, Jeff. We'll probably see some of Christian Wood's best basketball just because of the guys he's playing next to, and the lack of pressure he's probably going to feel like
that's
the last
true.
couple
and it's
of years.
Also like it's like an opportunity cost thing too, because the Mavs traded a 1 for him, right? Like the Rockets paid him big money. The Lakers they're getting they get any kind of thing, anything close to like the level that we know he could play, it's a win. You're right.
Yeah, so that's why I think it's a good get for them. It seems low risk, high reward. Christian Wood, low pressure on his part, gets to play alongside a couple of the greats. So we'll see with Christian Wood. It is telling that it took until the beginning of September for someone to sign him. So that could just be the writing on the wall there, and maybe Christian Wood repeats and has another disappointing season. But that is TBD. The other signing from yesterday, Danny Green signs a 1-year deal with the 76ers. Very underwhelming signing. You figured Danny Green would end up on a team at some point. This is more news to me because of the James Harden situation, and maybe obviously not even close to the same caliber of player at this point.
Have you seen the James Harden rumblings coming out the last couple of days? Ramona Shelburne, I know, had one. I think there was 2 of them I saw. There was one that from Adam Silver, that Harden was upset when he wasn't named to the All-Star team and he was supposed to be on the reserve team. Didn't respond to Silver for multiple days. So that's why Pascal got named to reserve, and Harden apparently wanted to join the All-Star festivities, but was like shutting out because he was pouting, was the exact word. He was pouting about not making it. And then the other one was that Rivers and players felt some type of way about him flying ahead without the team early to go enjoy Miami nightlife, as they said before a game there without the team, which they said is not uncommon for players in the NBA, but the players and staff did not take too kindly to it. And with a man of, what we know about James Harden, I could see why that might irk them at some point during the season. So I agree with you, Dunny. I think that seems to be some preparation for the 76ers.
Yeah, and not like that's an answer of filling the void that James Harden might leave if he is gone, but it does seem like a move. Like, all right, let's bring in a veteran. Let's bring in a guy who can shoot, a guy who's played this position over the years. I don't know. It seemed a little weird otherwise. It almost seems like a move they maybe should have made last offseason because it's, if they had known that was going to be their last shot with this core, they might have done something like this last year. But yeah, it just this move to me just seems almost confirming that things are still not great in Philly. between Harden and the organization. Jake, everything you just said confirmed that. I mean, if those things are true, and even your second point about him flying out before the team and trying to do his own thing, and that might be common practice, but kind of what I was just saying a minute ago, like the Sixers had championship aspirations last year, and whether they knew that window was as small as it's going to be, who knows? But if they're upset that Harden was doing that, it's 10x that probably, because they had a championship in mind. Harden was speaking as if that was what was on his mind too. You can really never consider that that's what's on James Harden's mind, because we've just never really seen the focus or drive to be able to get to that next level as a player. So we'll see, man. I think, like I said, not that interesting on paper. Danny Green signs, okay. But maybe reading a little in between the lines here with the Philadelphia 76ers.
We'll see. They're the gift that keeps on giving. The only other thing before we go on to the division preview is it's Friday, I think. Team USA in the semifinal against Germany. Did you see Dennis Schroeder's illustrious performance he put up for Germany? 4 for 26 today. The shooters shoot mentality. But they won in a win, so it didn't hurt the team. They held them up afterwards. And then Canada will face Serbia. So that'll be a very interesting potential Team USA Canada matchup Sunday. I haven't been able to watch a lot of those games. They're early, right as I'm starting work during the day. Like, can't really get to it, but that's a fun semifinal coming up. Just wanted to note that before we go on.
Yeah, for sure. Team USA looks good for the most part, and that should be fun to continue watching FIBA. I've enjoyed it. It's a nice little get me ready for the NBA season.
Definitely.
Oh yeah.
All right, you guys.
All right, let's get
cracking. Yeah, let's get into these division previews. Starting with the Boston Celtics.
Of course.
A whopping win total of 54.5 wins. What are you guys feeling for this total? I think you guys know where my answer's at, so I'll ask you guys first.
I wonder where Donnie's going to go with this. I'm going, despite Stevie Boston being as dead and the Celtics ripping my heart out last playoffs, as the Celtics playoff guy. Let's just get that on the record, Donnie. We knew who was the Celtics playoff guy last year. I'm taking the over. I'm not going to buy all in again like I did in the Celtics last year, but I do like the Celtics quite a bit. I think the Kristaps Porzingis is a very, very, very underrated acquisition. Kristaps Porzingis was fantastic. He just happened to play basketball on the Washington Wizards last year. And if you don't know who the Washington Wizards are, it's because they're the team no one cares about in the NBA. They're not bad enough that people care about them, and they're not good enough where people care about them. They're just kind of there, and they've been there for, it feels like 5-10 years now. Porzingis had a phenomenal season there, arguably the best season of his career, and he brought the Celtics kind of what they needed as a big man who can also stretch the floor a little bit. We talked about, part of the issues for the Celtics why they came up short last year was you had, Al Horford or Rob Williams in there, and Al Horford, he was a little inconsistent. He's getting old. We love Big Al, but he's getting old, little inconsistent. Then you have Rob Williams, who's there for the defense, but he's kind of hurts you offensively. Porzingis now gives you flexibility, right? Where Porzingis can play good defense, he can play great offense, he can stretch the floor, he could get 15 rebounds a night if he wanted, and he's also 7'3", which helps sometimes a little bit when you have a guy like that. I know we talked about this too. I know the Celtics are going to miss Marcus Smart not having him, but if we, take all the Celtics, fandom aside and how much they loved Marcus Smart, if I look at what this team probably needed more, another guard, who plays defense like Marcus Smart, inconsistent outside shooter, or a big man like Porzingis, I kind of lean more towards Porzingis. I think he's going to help the team more overall. And it kind of allows, too, if the Celtics want to play big, Tatum can play the 3, Brown can play the 2, and I think that's huge. Where we saw a lot of times last year, it was tough for the Celtics to play big because you really couldn't do that. It just kind of felt awkward. They weren't as athletic on the floor as they could be, didn't run as much. I think this kind of gives them a lot more roster flexibility, play big, play small in games because you want to play small. Porzingis can be your 5. He can be your 5 because he can still kind of play like that hybrid big. Even though he's 7'3", he's still going to shoot threes. He's still going to, make defenders, guard him, stretch the floor. And he's, fast enough, quick enough to get down the court. So I love the addition. I think the Celtics go over 54.5 wins. I think it's more the same from the Celtics, right? They're a good team, well-coached team, balanced team. There's games they're going to win by 45. There's going to be games where they shoot 3 of 30 from 3, and you're just going to have to accept it. But overall, this is a team where I think Dunny, and I'm not saying this because you're on the pod, but I think this is a team where, once again, the expectation should be we want to win an NBA Finals. And I think that's the roster you still have here. When you have the 2 J's and you add a guy like Porzingis, you got to have finals or, disappointment, I guess, as your season expectations.
I agree. Jake, what do you got for the green team?
If we're talking finals expectations, yeah, they're going to be one of the finals favorites for sure. But I'm taking the under on all of these hot tie teams because if Dame gets traded to the Heat, we have the Celtics, Heat, Bucks, and I think the Cavs are going to be a really good regular season team, probably better than they were last year. I don't think it's going to be really hard for one of those teams to stay at 55, 56 wins. So I think a lot of them, 54.5 is this number, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's such a tough number for me. Like, I feel like it's right dead on because this should be a 55 win team. But if the East is any bit better at the top, and it's competitive, and the Heat, I think, are the big team I'm looking for, taking a big chunk of that, but the Cavs could be there. I'm higher on the Knicks, I think, than both of you guys are. So they could be a team that if they win 50 games, all of a sudden a regular season team. That's the only reason I'm taking the under. But everything you said about the Celtics and that I think they're a better overall team, like the Porzingis addition and what that's going to do, changing it up with getting rid of Smart, even if it's a big change. I feel like it's beneficial for the team chemistry in the long run, putting Tatum just in that lead, finally in his alpha role where he can be. I think it's all going to be good. I just think the East is going to be a fucking war zone. I'm taking unders on a lot of those, on probably the Bucks and probably the Heat too. I don't know what the Heat number is. I haven't looked at it yet, but probably we'll take it on the Bucks. And it's going to be my trend is the tie team to take the unders because I just think the East is going to be.
Celtics had 57 wins last year.
It was
right?
57 last year.
Just above this number. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so surprisingly, the non-surprising part is that I took the over on this win total. The surprising part is that this was actually the most difficult for me to choose out of all these teams because I think, Jake did a good job of laying it out there. They did eclipse this number last year. I think if you watched them the last couple months of the season, you wouldn't have guessed that it was a 57-win team. Still probably over that 50 mark, but if we're not forgetting, they didn't lose a game in November last year. So they started the season about as hot as you could start, came down to earth a little bit, and then didn't finish the season all that great. I do think they're going to be an improved team. I do think that they will pass this number again, so don't hear what I'm not saying. But I do think, for any team, it's difficult to get in the mid-50s for wins. I think Jake's right that the East is going to be a little more competitive. You have all these teams where you're like, oh, those teams could also be in the mid-50s. Or those, is this Bucks team going to show up again and maybe they're punching around 60 wins again as a squad. So I think it's going to be a little more difficult this year for the Celtics. I do think they get it done. I think Porzingis gives them a little bit higher of a ceiling than Smart did, and I think Steve was alluding to that. So yeah, I'm with Steve. I'm going over on wins here. I wouldn't be surprised if this was a 60-win team, but I also wouldn't be surprised if this team won 52 games or something like that, and they're still top 3 in the Eastern Conference. So, I'll take 50-plus wins in any way, shape, or form for this team, and I think I think that's a doable margin.
Word. Let's do all right. 15 seconds each. I want for this one. That's what I meant to put that in the thing. I didn't bring it up for the best case and worst case scenario. I just want like a quick, like if give me each give for all these teams and we do this. Like if you have to break down what happened in their season under 20 seconds to somebody, they're like, oh, what happened to what was good with the 2023 Celtics, and you have to break it down, give what the best case thing is going to be, which for the Celtics is going to be obvious, but all these teams it won't be obvious. That's why we can get creative with what we think it, and worst case get a little, add some flair to it. See what you come up with. So I'll go first if you guys want. The best case scenario for the Boston Celtics is clearly everything that I said is wrong. Jason Tatum is clearly the number one wing on that list that we were talking about last week. He's MVP. Jaylen Brown is flirting with all NBA first team, but the voters suck and they only give him second team just because they're like, well, we can't put two Celtics on there, blah, 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 but it doesn't matter. Celtics win like 63 games, walk through the first two rounds, play the Heat in the conference finals, win in 5, and then they face off with the Nuggets, have a nice series, but end up winning in 6 on their home floor. I think that's best case. Worst case scenario, Jaylen Brown asked for a trade in January, and this team, who knows what it looks like after that. That's the in between. Absolute worst case scenario, I think, is still the Jaylen Brown. He got the deal, but I still feel like the clock is the doomsday clock went down a lot, but those rumors are going to kick up at any point because that's what people love to do.
Yeah, I'm similar. Best case scenario, Celtics win the NBA Finals, right? This is what they've been trying to do for 3-4 years. Best case scenario, they win the NBA Finals, and the reason they win it is Porzingis plays like he did in Washington and basically becomes the third part of that big three with Tatum, Brown, and Porzingis, where it's like any night one of these guys could go off for 30 points and 12-plus rebounds. Worst case scenario, you kind of alluded to it, Jake. I'm kind of in the same boat. It may not just be Jaylen Brown, but the Celtics realize like we gotta switch up the team. I don't think they'll miss the playoffs. They'd need a catastrophe to miss the playoffs with this team. But I could see a first or even a second round exit where they're like, you know what, Jason Tatum's our future. We got to build around him, and let's see what we can get. And at that point, outside of Tatum, anyone's able to get traded. As much as I love Jaylen Brown, I think that would be obviously the biggest return they would get. And if it's another disappointing season where they fall short and it's an early round exit, I think worst case scenario is we could see something like Jaylen Brown get traded or obviously Brogdon. Maybe they're like Porzingis 1 year, it didn't work. Let's try to find another team for him. Something like that. So I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I think it's finals or it's another, fall short in the playoffs and trade everyone.
All
Dunny.
right. Well,
you got some time to think.
I just knocked on wood while you guys were talking, and I'm going to do
That's why I loved it. We start with the fire, and then it's like, oh, but you never know.
And I'm going to knock on wood one more time before I say my worst case. My best case is obviously the same as you guys. This team is dominant. They clear that 55 win mark, go to the NBA championship, and they beat specifically a team like Denver, Phoenix, or Golden State would taste the best just because of the revenge pie. But I also, I think best case has to be where they beat someone that guys like Stephen A. Smith or other, TV personalities can't try to downplay their title like Nick Wright might try to do if they beat a lesser team in the NBA Finals. So specifically, a juggernaut team from the West is who they beat when they win the NBA championship, and that would be best case scenario. Worst case, and I will knock on wood again, worst case, they miss the playoffs. Porzingis gets injured very early on. Basically, the trio of their bigs, it's doomsday for them. Horford, we finally see that regression at age 37, 38. Porzingis gets hurt very early, and Rob Williams can't stay healthy yet another season. And this team could be in big trouble if all three of those things happen at the same time. Worst case scenario, I think the Celtics just miss the playoffs if they aren't able to have all three of those bigs in rotation.
Yeah, I think a lot would have to go wrong for the Celtics to miss the playoffs.
Yes.
A lot.
A lot, yes. And
Hopefully I
that's
just reverse
even if the
jinxed.
worst case scenario happened, I feel like they'd still be like
They'd squeak in.
7 seeds. Yeah, they'd
Yeah,
just be-
exactly.
It doesn't matter. Though those things aren't gonna happen, Dunny. We just gotta, we're giving the people everything, every option, and going from there. And you got the Celtics out of the way. Now we get to make
Yes.
fun of all. Now you get to make fun of the 29 other teams and think of their worst case scenario. So just think about that. And my worst case scenario for the Cavs is I'm gonna have fun because I'm a little bit of a masochist and also kind of want this. And part of me wants this team to have a horrible downfall because I don't think the best case scenario is as good as your best case scenario. But we'll get to that with everybody else. We've got, what do we have here? MVP. I think we can all agree on, right?
Oh, for the Celtics, yeah, Tatum.
Yes.
Yes. No, not for the league. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. Most likely to be traded though, Dunny. I want to hear from you first.
I think it's got to be Brogdon. And it's just because of his name being in the rumors this summer. So that already tells us that Brad was fine with getting rid of him if the price was right. And then also, what he's feeling. And Brad's probably thinking about that too. Brogdon knows that he was supposed to be the one in that deal to get Porzingis, but the third team fell through. He was supposed to go to the Clippers. That just didn't end up amounting to anything. And I just think it's an easy one. I think there's still a market out there for Brogdon. I think he may feel slighted, and if those emotions or feelings come up at all, Brad may have no choice but to trade him. So I think Brogdon's most likely to be traded here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'm right with you, Donnie. You said it perfectly. I think that's the most logical choice.
That's the Celtics. Overall, I think we're pretty. Oh, Brogdon. Yeah, it's Brogdon. Overall, though, I think the Celtics we're all pretty high on. We still even me saying under is just me thinking that the top of the East just won't get maybe. I honestly think if the Celtics, there's going to be a race to 55 wins. So 54.5 is really hard for me to pick any of those teams. And the thing you mentioned about the Bucks is with Tatum, if I have to pick between one of those guys that can carry a team to 60 wins, I'm going to lean Giannis. But I don't think either of them can do it. I think the Bucks have a whole host of other problems they have to deal with beyond Giannis. We'll get to that in their preview. But let's go on to a team that has a lot more problems than both those teams.
Yes. The Philadelphia 76ers. This win total is crazy, especially with what's going on, in my opinion. Over-under for wins for the Philadelphia 76ers is set at 49.5. I just alluded to it. I'm smashing the under here. A lot of that has to do with what's going on with James Harden. It just seems like the ugliest situation the franchise and organization could possibly be in. We don't know if they're getting any sort of return on James Harden. We don't know what capacity he's going to be there. If he is going to be there, is he going to be fat James Harden? It's way too many question marks. They're signing Danny Green out of desperation. If a team is signing Danny Green out of desperation, doesn't have James Harden to start the year or at all, and probably an upset Embiid, I do not think, if I'm on the fence about the Celtics, who I think have a far better roster getting to 55 wins, I don't think I can justify the 76ers getting to 50 wins. I don't see this happening for Philly this year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm on the under as well. I think, we saw this team last year kind of do what I thought was kind of the ceiling for Philadelphia, where they gave the Celtics a war of a playoff series. Joel Embiid played like an MVP, won the MVP, and was the best player in basketball in the second half of the regular season. And it still came up short. They still had their own problems. Now we're going to an offseason with even more issues. I don't even know if Harden's going to be there. And even if he is, what Harden are we even going to see? I'm down on James Harden. I'm down on this team as a whole. And not to mention, too, guys are getting older. Tobias Harris is now 31 years old. You have James Harden, who's now 34 years old. Even if he's there, Obviously, you have Embiid and Maxey, and that's your core. But they didn't really get better in the offseason either. Who'd they add? Pat Beverly and Mo Bamba. I love Mo Bamba in 2K. He's not that great in real life. And Pat Bev, he's got a great podcast, great personality, but I don't think he's helping this team. Then you had Danny Green. I look at this team. There's nothing that really excites me. The only thing that really does excite me is I think we might be able to see Tyrese Maxey really have a big year if Harden is traded, no longer there, or if they're like, we got to get what we can get, or Harden's just checked out mentally, we could see that. But other than this, man, I'm taking the under with Philly. I think they're one of the more disappointing teams this season, and it's one of those, where we could see Embiid have 38 and 16 rebounds, right, and they lose by 15. That's kind of the season I look at Philly this year.
Yeah.
That says it all, man.
They're not winning 50 games.
No.
They won 54 last year. They're not winning 50. Like James Harden, if I'll skip ahead to most likely to be traded, because I was hoping he'd be traded before this podcast, before we did these previews. He's the most likely to be traded, obviously. Right. But following him, if he gets traded, it's Joel Embiid. And if Joel Embiid gets traded in the middle of this season, which I think he requests a trade, there's been so many rumblings this summer about Embiid potentially asking for a trade that I feel like it's closer than we think. And maybe he'll stick it out if they trade Harden. But what is their answer? There's like you were going through, Steve. That's not a championship roster. No way is that a championship roster. And Embiid is turning 30 this year. He's a big man turning 30. I feel like he knows that too. And I don't know. I feel like this team is way closer to blowing it up right now than they're going to be to winning 50 games. So yeah, just rip the under because they're not in a spot that you should believe in them.
This is a pretty easy one too, right? The MVP of this team, Joel Embiid. The man who won MVP last year is still the MVP. Like I said, I want to give honorable mention to Tyrese Maxey because I think if they do blow it up, if they trade Harden, if stuff, this is where Tyrese Maxey could ball out and really show the type of player he is. But yeah, I think it's obvious. I think the Sixers are very obvious this year.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm with you.
It really seems like it's going to be a repeated version of, like, if we knew it was going to happen last year, like obviously the record and the way they finished the year, they seemed like much more of a juggernaut than they were. But if we knew the result of last year, it'd be pretty easy for us to say it's probably going to look very similar, just with less wins and maybe looking a little less impressive. Like Embiid will probably be in the MVP conversation again. We're probably going to say, wow, Philly really needs to get this guy some help. We're probably really going to like Maxey still. And that's going to be about it, man.
Yep.
And Nick Nurse, just a big question mark, kind of like Doc was, but in different ways. So
all right, so this is a fun one then. I'll start. Best case and worst case scenarios. So best case scenario for the Philadelphia 76ers. I don't even know. Like Joel has to stay. James Harden, the trade package is just obscene. Like they get like 2 first-round picks for some reason from the Clippers. I don't even think that's actually possible. I think the best case scenario is James Harden comes back and somehow refines his form, but also that Tyrese Maxey really takes a step to a point where we're like, that dude could potentially be one of the best guards in the league, maybe next year, maybe the year after, because that's what they need. They need him to take a level, but they're still best case, I feel like, a conference finalist and then get smacked by one of these better teams. Worst case, we've already laid out. Worst case scenario is Harden asks for a trade right before training camp, or he shows up, fat Harden, a lot of Chick-fil-A, a lot of cheesesteaks, gets traded to LA. They get a terrible trade package. Embiid's unhappy. We hear he's unhappy, and they have to trade him to the Knicks and then watch him go win 55 games in New York and beat them all the time. And they've got Tyrese Maxey, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of spelled it out. Worst case scenario, I'll start first with worst case. They got to trade Embiid. It gets to the point where they're like, we have to trade Embiid. Like Harden checks out. We don't have a team to build around Embiid. We've tried this. We just can't do it. We got to trade him, see what we can get. Obviously, you're going to get huge return. So I guess it's not the worst day, doomsday, but that's worst case because I'm not going to include any injuries in worst case or best case. I don't think that's like fair because obviously you could just do that for every team. Be like best player gets hurt, worst case, of course. But got to trade Embiid. Best case scenario, round two. Round two, they get to round two. They beat the Celtics once in the regular season. Like that might be all Philly fans will have for. Maybe give you that one win in the regular season to hold over the Celtics fans. And then I'll say, you know what? They get to round two. Harden plays more than we expect him to for Philly this year, and Tyrese Maxey looks like let's say an all-star. Let's say Tyrese Maxey looks like an all-star, scores maybe close to 25 points, 6 assists, and he's shooting the ball really well from outside the arc. And he's one of those, two-way guards. They play really good defense, play really good offense. I'll say that's best case scenario.
Yeah, so my thing kind of similar to Steve. Little different though. Best case scenario for the Sixers is they don't have to play the Celtics in the playoffs. and that happening, they make it to I think Steve nailed it, the second round. I think that's a fair expectation, and also I think Philly fans would probably be excited about that and then shouldn't expect anything more than that with this squad. So I think that's what happens here with the Sixers. The best case scenario, make it to the second round. Even having a playoff team that's competing, I think will be satisfactory for them, judging by the way things look right now. And then worst case, Harden flames out before the season even starts. Nick Nurse loses control of the locker room. Embiid ends up wanting out before Christmas, and they're just an absolute disaster, fringe playing team. I think that, that's unlikely, but I think definitely in the cards just with the personalities that are at bay here, the pressure from player to organization and vice versa, just, the years of build up with the process, Embiid winning his MVP, giving his all to the city and not really getting much in return. And then, Maxey's going to have his own personality and ego pretty soon too, because he's going to realize how good he is. And if he starts getting treated the same way Embiid was, he's probably not going to be around all that long either. So, yeah, I mean, best case, like I said, second round. Worst case is just a full-on self-implosion from the 76ers, and they miss the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Hell yeah, we're moving on.
Oh yeah,
we're moving on to the New York Knicks here.
Let's do it.
This should be an interesting one. I think we might be all over the place here with the Knicks.
Yeah, I can start if you want. We got the Knicks that are pretty much a copy and paste from the same team last year, just 1 year older. Not many major changes, which is surprising coming from a team from New York City, but they're kind of running it back with the roster they had. 47 wins last year, over-unders at 45.5. I'm going to go slightly over here. Listen, I don't think the Knicks are a championship team, but I also don't think the Knicks are a bad team. The Knicks are a fun team. Jalen Brunson was a darling. I'll put the hand up right now, and I'll say I whiffed on him going to New York. I thought the lights were going to be a little too bright, that Brunson wasn't going to be able to step up and be that guy. And honestly, if we're being honest, guys, I think Brunson was 1A, Randall was 1B last year. I think if we got to the point in the season where Brunson was their go-to guy. Same story with the Knicks, though, right? You have these guys that are just super inconsistent, and you can't have a core with super inconsistency. And Julius Randle and R.J. Barrett. I liked when they added Hart. I think that actually helped the team a lot. Emmanuel Quickley, another guy who's fun but super inconsistent. And you just look at this team, and it's just there's really no huge changes. Till last year, it's the same team. They lost my darling Obi Toppin, which I'll talk about later when we get to Obi Toppin's new team. But overall, I think it's a solid team. It's a fun regular season team. They're going to have some exciting games. Brunson's going to put up some big numbers. Randall's, of course, going to have his big games, his bad games. Same with R.J. Barrett. I'll take the over slightly, but I'm like, if they hit the over, which is 45.5, I don't think they're getting over 50. I think I'm looking at the Knicks right around the 44 to 48 range for wins. I'll just over.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I have a similar feeling. I am going under on this team win total unless there's a trade. I do have that in our doc. I think this is a team definitely in this division that's the most likely to make a trade at some point next season. And then, probably in the Eastern Conference, I probably have them, top 3 or 4 for teams that are ready to make a move and just should. But yeah, I mean, they're kind of running back the same team as last year. I think Brunson will be great, maybe even better, which is crazy to think about. But the way things ended with the Knicks and, the shit that Julius Randle got, which by the end, I don't think he deserved all of that. I remember we talked about it, but like the ripping down of the posters, the stomping, like, yeah, he was bad. I don't know if he was that bad, and what got ruined there between city and player? Who knows? I mean, Julius Randle's a guy who, at one point, the Knicks were putting up on a pedestal and crowning this guy as their king, and then things change fast. Last year, everyone in New York hates Randle, so there's that weird chemistry between city and player there that I don't know if that can be mended or how Randle feels about it, if he even wants to be there. And you mentioned, Steve, like Randle thought he was the guy. Brunson came in and quickly told everyone that Randle was not the guy. It's Brunson's team. And then I'm just not a believer in, this team's identity. Like Coach Tibbs, the guys, there's been several people on this roster who have come out publicly and basically bashed his coaching style and said that they don't like playing for him. Obi Toppin, I believe that's the reason he left. I don't think he got along with Coach Tibbs. There's some turmoil there. Evan Fournier's come out a bunch, who I think at this point he's probably irrelevant to this roster, but he's been vocal about it. And then did they make enough moves in the offseason to get them over that hump? I don't really think so. I think, they're solid. They did enough to be the Knicks again for next year, but I have to go under here. I think a trade's possibly coming for them, so maybe, depending on the return, they could get over, but Barrett didn't make the jump we thought. Randle was a disaster in the playoffs. And towards the end of the season, and I just don't know about the Knicks. Big question mark for me.
Yeah, believing in the Knicks is not a fun thing to do. Let's just start with that. But that's such a low total, 44.5, and like we talked about, or 45.5, and if the Sixers are so bad and they're in turmoil, I feel like the team to make up the ground is the Knicks. And it's like the rest of the teams around them too. Who are we talking about? I mean, I guess we're talking Orlando is going to be better, like with that, like from like the 5, not the 5 to 6 range. Atlanta, I worry about that. I worry about Atlanta. That's for sure. I feel like they're just in a good spot where the top of this East, they can rack up wins against like some of these really bad teams because of Tibbs. I agree with you on Tibbs, especially when it comes to the playoffs. I think it's never going to work in the playoffs, but they're going to be a regular season grind team. I still think Barrett has a level, unless he just can't do it with Tibbs. Maybe he's just not a match. This is really just me believing in Jalen Brunson more than anything else, and that was with what you said at the beginning. I completely underestimated how good that guy would be, and now I will never do that. I feel like he could will them to 46 wins. And I feel like if there's a slip up from one of the top teams, whether it's the Cavs, whether the Heat, whatever happens with them, Bucks, Celtics, if one of these teams slips up, the Knicks are the team I feel like that are going to be there ready to win 50 games. And all of a sudden, I just wouldn't be shocked to see them as like the 2 or 3 seed in the East, but then they still are underdogs when they're in their, second round series or whatever like that. That's kind of, it's definitely a gamble, but I'm betting on their best case scenario compared to the rest of the East teams in their range, I guess.
You think they're a much better regular season team than a playoff team, essentially?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
certainly. But they also smacked my team in the playoffs last year, so I don't know
They
why
did.
I'm saying that.
they did.
So,
Jake hasn't forgot.
no, I'll never forget. That was the most, I don't need to relive that.
Yeah, that was the most surprising series.
That's why I'm probably high on this team. I'm
Probably,
like,
yeah, because that's the last thing you remember about
That's
the
the last
Knicks,
thing I
right?
remember.
Like, I know
But
what
I'm
they're
kicking
capable
ass.
of.
Yes, and I still believe I'm still on RJ Barrett Island. I have a lot of RJ Barrett stock. That ain't going away anytime
He's only
soon.
23.
So,
He's still
I know,
23
yeah.
years old, and
Which
he's
is
shown flashes. Like we've seen it before. He's just so inconsistent.
And if they
shooting,
do
man.
give Randall a lesser role if they finally say, Randall, you're the third guy, maybe and no Toppin. I'm not they didn't play Toppin a lot too, but maybe this is just like finally the year. It's just going to be Barrett and Brunson, and we see what happens. And I don't know. I'm willing to take a gamble on those two compared to the only team I'm really thinking about. Indiana. Obviously, we're going to be big Indiana fans.
Oh, wait till we get
see
to
how
the
high
Central.
we see how good we feel about that.
Wait till we get to the Central.
I feel like Indiana could be the other team here, but I'll stick with Brunson because he's shown, especially even in the summer, has shown me nothing to think that he's going to be worse off going into this year.
So are we all in agreement? Team MVP Jalen Brunson, is that who we expect to be?
Yes.
Yeah, I
and
think-
Randall traded.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think Randall or Barrett for me.
I think
But
I was going to go
it has to
Barrett
be
over Randall.
Barrett, if it's an Embiid trade, it's got to be Barrett. So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Barrett. I think
It's-
Barrett would be the piece they would need to give to get the best return. I think if you're trying to get a superstar, everyone's asking for Barrett before Randall. So that's why I would go Barrett over Randall most likely trade.
Yeah, I think the Randall trade happens if the team's hand is forced and they feel like they need to make a move. The Barrett trade happens if people are calling and they're trying to make a splash midseason.
Yeah.
But yeah, neither would really surprise me. I think just the way the season ended, Randall would make a little more sense. But if they are, star chasing or trying to find that next big guy to bring to New York, I think the package would probably be Barrett.
Agreed. All right. Due to the scenarios here.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'll let you start, Steve. What's your
All
worst
right.
and best?
So I'll start best case. I think best case, the Knicks trade for a superstar. I said this last year. I still kind of believe it. We'll see. I think Zion to the Knicks is something that could actually happen. I really do think that could be something in the cards. We talked about Embiid a little bit. I'm talking about a star on that type of level where they're going to bring in a guy like that. And it's going to actually help the Knicks. I don't think they're a championship team, even if they get a guy like that, depending on the package they give up. I don't think they're a championship team. But you know what? Maybe with their style, maybe with the way they play defense in the playoffs, we could see this team get to the conference finals. I'll give them conference finals as a ceiling. And the reason I'll say conference finals is maybe a huge trade. And best case scenario is you can get Randall on the other side of that deal and not RJ Barrett. And RJ Barrett takes the leap that we've been saying he should be able to take for 2-3 years now. I think that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is they just can't get a deal done for Randall or Barrett. They just can't find someone who's willing to take on either player. And they're just kind of stuck in neutral where it's a Knicks team that might be, like I said, middle of the road, regular season team, not going to do anything in the playoffs. Worst case scenario, maybe Brunson takes a little bit step back, looks more like he did in Dallas when he was coming off the bench behind Luka or the number 2, as compared to being the guy in New York. Because we could see that guys go from year 1 to year 2 like that. We've seen it many times where players just go up and down year to year. So that would probably be worst case scenario. This is a team that maybe misses the playoffs, 35-40 wins, can't find a deal done. They're just kind of stuck in neutral, and they're kind of stuck with what they got. So I don't think it's going to be a disaster worst case scenario for the Knicks, but it's going to be one of those where you don't want to be, right? You either want to be really bad or you want to have a chance to win a championship. And I think worst case scenario is you have a team in the biggest market in the world that's just like, meh.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. Knicks for me. I think best case scenario, second round of the playoffs. quickly takes another big step for this team. Barrett maybe steps up a little more, but is kind of on par to what he's been. Randall, they're able to, either trade him and get a good return, or he starts playing like Julius Randle again. And then I think, as crazy as it sounds, I think there's still room for Brunson to improve. If there's no trade, I think the highest ceiling, unfortunately for them, probably is the second round. I just think the East is the top of the East is really, really good. I don't see them getting to a conference finals unless they make some crazy trade, and Giannis ends up in New York or something halfway through the season. Obviously, no one sees that happening. And then worst case, things get worse between players and Tibbs. Randall flames out again and requests a trade mid-season. Steve, you kind of mentioned it. They're not able to find a trade partner, and this team misses the playoffs, and Brunson starts to get unhappy, and it's just a huge shitstorm in New York, which is possible, but I think that's worst case is the squad personnel issues and then ultimately miss the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, worst case, Randall trade, Barrett. You were just like, damn, this dude is just Andrew Wiggins 2.0. He's reached his ceiling. He's pretty good, inconsistent. I don't know what's good with these Canadians, though. We got, thank God for SGA. Thank God for Jamal Murray. That's what Canada's about. Who knows? I mean, Canada aside, SGA looked fucking incredible. I did see today against Luka, and that shit was, or yesterday, whatever. That shit was crazy. But anyways, worst case scenario, that's what happens. Brunson, small guards, starts to slip. Randall, gone. Tibbs fired. This could go bad. I mean, this very well could go bad. Best case scenario, it's Boston Celtics, New York Knicks, Eastern Conference Finals, Game 6 in the Garden. They're down 3-2, and that's where they're at. And we'll see what happens in the Madison Square Garden, not the Boston Garden. I realize I have to specific gardens here. At home, Game 6, back against the wall, and that's where you had 2 games to make the finals. I think that's their absolute best case scenario, but that also involves the Joel Embiid trade, and that's also really the best case scenario, because if they trade for Embiid, that's not really a trade for this year as much as it is for next year when they can build in the off season and see what team they can put around him. But that's their biggest thing. If they could get Embiid out of Philly. And I think it's 50-50, maybe even, that if he did request a trade, that it would be the Knicks in the field. Seems like it's sizing up that way. That's their best case scenario. Joel Embiid, the Knicks.
Love it. Yeah, Knicks fans are listening to that and just crossing their fingers listening to Happy Hour Hoops right now. They're like, please.
We got 2 teams left here.
Yeah, let's do the Nets.
Nets Raptors. Nets have, which I tend to think is a disrespectful over-under for this squad. The over-under for win total is 37.5 for the Brooklyn Nets. And if you put that in front of me right now with some cash to bet, I would take the over. Because, well, for a few different reasons. I think Mikal Bridges is our guy. I think if we had to make a Mount Rushmore of players not on our actual teams who are beloved by the Happy Hour Hoops guys, it is Mikal Bridges is one of those guys. Absolutely. He's on that Mount Rushmore.
I also love me some Cam Johnson, too.
Yes.
He was another one that surprised me. How the jump he made from going from Phoenix to Brooklyn. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's almost as if everyone was so just ready to give up on this team because they were like, oh, look how average the Brooklyn Nets are. Look at this return that they got back for Kyrie. Yeah, it was, sure they got Bridges, but what else do they have? They have Bridges. They have Cam Johnson. They have shooting up and down this roster, which was a big point that I tried to emphasize last year when they were going into the playoffs. I'm like, let's not count this team out against Philly, which obviously, they couldn't stack up against them, but they made some changes this offseason. They have Bridges, who I believe is going to take another massive step. He's going to, have a full offseason to game plan and be able to practice with this team. He's having a massive summer for Team USA. I think he's really going to take a step, and they're going to hand him the keys. And, there's bigs like Claxton that I like on this squad. I think everyone has a weird vision for the Nets, and I think rightfully so, just because of how everything flamed out with the different big threes that they had the last 2 years. Harden came in and out, Durant, Kyrie, and it was just like, oh my God, how is this team even still put together right now? But I think from getting out of all of that, they're in pretty good shape, and their roster looks pretty damn good for all those things that have happened over the last couple of years. I like the over here.
Yeah,
I might be a mini Brooklyn Nets fan, low key.
I'm with you on the over for kind of all the reasons you named, Dunny. Mikal Bridges, obviously we loved him in Phoenix. I said he was the best, role player in basketball, and then he goes to a team to be the guy, and he became the guy in the second half. And this is a guy I can see who's not only could be an all-star this coming season, all-NBA. I could see him on one of the all-NBA teams, the way Mikal Bridges play, because he has that elite defense on top of now showing that he can ball out offensively, a great shooter, efficient player. And he was doing a little bit of playmaking in Brooklyn, too, when he got there. So I really like the over here. I think you kind of laid it out. This is a lot of names where, maybe not household names right now, but you look up and down this roster, you're like, these guys can play. These guys can play. I hope Cam Thomas is just working on defense all offseason, because that was the only thing holding him back from being a regular guy who could score 20 any night. He was just a liability on defense. So if he's working on that, Cam Johnson, like you said, took an enormous leap from Phoenix to Brooklyn. Dorian Finney-Smith has been a solid defender who can take knockdown shots for you. You have Dinwiddie, and then Nick Claxton, who's 24 years old, who probably has potential to be one of the best defensive bigs in all of basketball. So you look at this team, I think it's a good team, and I think it's a team that's improving. And that's the big thing here why I'm taking the over. This is a team now that after just maybe 30 games of playing together at the end of last year, they're finally going to have a whole offseason together. They didn't really change too much of the core, maybe a couple new faces in there, but this is a team that's going to play together, get better as the season goes on. And they're all guys that are kind of haven't reached their prime yet. These are still guys that have room to grow, have room to improve. And I like teams like that, where you have that team chemistry, you have that core, and you kind of learn and grow together. And I think Brooklyn Nets are in a great spot where this is a team you can just kind of work with that. Do they have a superstar? No. We'll see what Bridges turns into. I think he can be considered a superstar by the end of the year, and I would not bat an eyelash at that. But I think this is a team that, on top of just Bridges, has a lot of good players that can kind of work together, gel together. And I think this potentially second best team in the Atlantic. I don't think that's crazy. I really don't think that. I don't think that's as crazy of a take as it sounds. Maybe the win totals right now, of course, make it seem wild because, they're 7 behind or 8 behind the Knicks, 12 under Philly. I would not be surprised if the Brooklyn Nets finish second in the Atlantic this year.
No, I wouldn't.
Why are they 37.5? What makes them think they're
they don't have the big names.
They can't get 40 wins in the East. I know, but it's crazy to me. So I'm with you. I think they're closer. They could be a 45 win team
absolutely
pretty easily. I think. Yeah, the East. This low end of the East is it's not going to be. It's going to be competitive, but it's not great. It's a lot of young teams. And this is not a. This is a team Bridges is going to be the best player out of the. If you're considering the Knicks, you want to keep them above, or you can lump them in too. I mean, it's Bridges or Halliburton or Trae Young is really who we're talking about. And a lot of us are going to pick Bridges in that scenario. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. It feels like he has another level to go too.
I agree.
So, yeah, I'm with you guys there. So he's the MVP, obviously.
Well, I was going to say that makes MVP easy for this
Most
team.
likely to be traded is pretty obvious too. Come on.
Ben
It's easy.
Simmons.
Yeah, it's bad. Like that guy.
It's Ben
There's come on.
Do we see a scenario where Ben Simmons checks into this team where he's like, you know what, I'm just gonna play like maybe stretch big defense,
in
like
the best case scenario?
yeah, like I'm not, yeah, obviously best case dream scenario, whatever, but do we see a scenario like percent chance where Ben Simmons actually plays basketball and good basketball for this team?
For Brooklyn?
Yeah.
28%.
That's higher than I thought you would say, honestly. It's honestly higher than I thought you would say because my
Good
team
basketball,
has
it would be
changed.
lower. But
My-
basketball, like he's on the court playing, 28.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's not hurting you. He's out there, and it's obviously he's not playing to the level he played early in his career, but he's also not playing where it's like Ben Simmons is hurting our team. My tune has changed a little bit where I'm like, he might actually just kind of be an all right guy for them if he buys it.
I'm starting to think he plays.
I am too. I am too.
I'm not one of the suckers who got sold on the Ben Simmons videos hitting threes.
No.
But I did see a video of him, and someone was just so honestly asking him, like, where he's at for going into the season. And he wholeheartedly just basically said, like, I'm just trying to play basketball this year without any pain in my body. And for the first time in a long time, I, like, felt kind of bad for Simmons and almost, like, believes him in a way. Like, oh, yeah, at this point, he probably knows he's not going to be the star of a team, let alone the Brooklyn Nets, because now they have Mikal Bridges. At this point, he's 27 years old, which is crazy that Ben's already 27 years old. We're not, like, waiting for the superstar emergence anymore. We're waiting for him to be serviceable. And I think if he can get that into his head, I think, and, you know, he can get on the court and the back isn't an issue or whatever else is bothering him isn't an issue, I think he could actually, you know, give this team some purpose this year. But, you know, it is still that big what if. I'm not going to be crazy and say that, you know, he's definitely going to be there the first game or whatever, but I wouldn't be surprised.
And to your point, Dunny, I think it's a lot easier to try to just get back to playing basketball when you don't have that much pressure on you and you're playing with guys like Bridges, Johnson, Dinwiddie, rather than all the pressure because you're supposed to be this big three with Kyrie and KD. I think it's night and day difference for mentally the pressure on Ben Simmons if he does want to just be like, I want to play basketball for this team. That's why I kind of changed up a little bit where I'm like, if he's still here, if he's saying that he just wants to play, this is kind of the perfect spot for a no pressure. All right, go out there and just see what you can do type of deal.
Yeah. Especially when that win total is as low as it is, you know, no pressure, man. People don't even think you guys are going to get 40 wins.
Exactly.
That's crazy, man.
We doing worst best case for the Brooklyn Nets here?
Sure.
Send
All
it.
right.
Start it, Donnie.
I'll start us off here. I think worst case, I really, you know, and this shows how high I am on the Brooklyn Nets. I think worst case is they're a play-in team. Unless they like do some sort of blow up scenario here where I can't see them doing, or there's catastrophic injuries, I don't think they could be past the 10 seed. I think worst case they're playing and they're competing there. It's as simple as that. I just believe in this group. I believe in what they started to build last year. Steve, you said it at the top when we first started talking about them. Like, they just have a solid group of guys, and then even their question marks on their team. Like, they brought in Lonnie Walker, they brought in Dennis Smith Jr., still young guys who have a lot left to prove and haven't really been given all that much opportunity in other teams. You know, we mentioned Ben Simmons. I think Cam Thomas is another guy that they're, you know, willing to put the ball in his hands and kind of let him cook. We saw as soon as Kyrie started sitting last year, Cam Thomas had a couple 40-point games. And
3 straight.
No one even.
3 straight 40-point games. I'm sorry.
Like,
no, not everybody can
21
do that.
years old.
Yeah.
Like, point guard of the future for the Nets? Maybe. So, I don't know. I have this weird feeling about the Nets where I think that's the basement for the Nets this year, which is crazy, but I don't see them going past the playing team. best case, see, this is where I don't have, a crazy floor for them, but I also don't have a crazy high ceiling. I think best case is they're probably a 5-6 seed, which I believe that's around where they finished last year for the playoffs. But I see them 5-6 seed. They maybe get to the second round, which I'd be surprised by. Probably a first round exit, but a fun playoff team, at least for Nets fans. Bridges takes a massive step. I think one of you guys said it, but he's in the conversation for all NBA. And like I mentioned, a guy like Cam Thomas steps up, and they have their point guard now. Ben Simmons is actually serviceable, and he's in the starting lineup, and he's this point forward who is making plays defensively and offensively. And the Brooklyn Nets are just fun, and they can get past this superstar era where they don't have to worry about Kyrie, KD, Harden anymore. So yeah,
I'm kind of very similar to you. I think worst case is that I think worst case would still be missed playoffs for me, and the reason I think why I would say that is maybe Bridges. No, I'm never gonna hate on Bridges because I think he is a guy, but maybe Bridges doesn't become that superstar that he kind of showed flashes of at the end of last year. And their role players just kind of continue to be role players. No one really improves, right? Cam Thomas still struggles with his defense. Maybe Cam Johnson kind of looks more like he did in Phoenix than he did in Brooklyn. Dinwiddie, inconsistent, stuff like that. Nick Claxton kind of very limited offensively. No one really improves in the spots where we think they'll improve. I think that's worst case. And then this team kind of misses the playoffs. They're a lottery team, but they're not bad enough where they get a top pick. Best case scenario, I think this team could probably make the semifinals of the Eastern Conference playoffs. I do. I mean, and maybe if they catch the right matchup, maybe, but we talk about it like right now we are coming, I guess, out of the big three era. We've been in the superstar big three era for a while. Now it's more superstar than big three. And the Nets are kind of, they're kind of different than that. They're kind of the odd man out where the way they built their team is a little bit different, and maybe they make it work. And this is the second best team, like I said, in the Atlantic. Mikal Bridges is all NBA, all world type player. And the Brooklyn Nets maybe flirt with 50 wins in the regular season and get to the semifinals and give a good fight to some of those teams in the East that have that juggernaut superstar on them. So that's kind of where I see the Nets. And I'll be honest with you guys, like if I had to pick worst case or best case, I lean more best case than I do worst case for this team. I'm very high on the Brooklyn Nets this year.
Yeah, I'm with you both. I lean both higher to more to the best case scenarios. I'll start with the best case scenario. I think Bridges is going to be better than last year. Like Cam Johnson, I like some of their role pieces, and I think this is a team that should either make the playoffs or they're going to be safely in the play-in the whole season and have a chance to make the playoffs right away. I think worst case scenario, they're still a play-in team, but they're battling, and everything you said, like people just don't step up. Bridges, maybe he just battles being a number one guy, getting a lot more attention during the season, things like that of that nature. Maybe they just don't shoot as well as we think. And I feel like this team needs to be a good shooting team, especially outside shooting team, to be successful. And that's really where the worst case scenario would come in. But I still feel like they'll be battling. They're not going to be one of the worst teams in the East. So I still feel like they'll be battling for the 10 spot regardless of the worst case scenario and still be hanging around there the whole season. We got one left.
Save the best for last, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Toronto.
That international team, the world champions, is
the world
Toronto
champs. Yeah.
Toronto allows us to say that. Toronto Raptors, very, very similar win total to the Brooklyn Nets here. 36.5. I have the under. I'm going to spoil things. We all have the under here.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because if you told me going into last year that the Brooklyn Nets had the roster they have now and the Toronto Raptors have the roster they have now, and you asked me this question, I would say that the Toronto Raptors would be smashing the over and the Brooklyn Nets would be way under. Obviously, the world doesn't work like that. as much as I'm in on the Brooklyn Nets and what they're building and those players, there's still quite a few guys I love on the Raptors. I just am not sure come the trade deadline where we're going to see many
That's
of
where
them,
I
if
land.
any of them, on this team.
Yep.
They lost their head coach. Things seemed to be bad last year. They lost Van Vliet. I don't really have much else to say about that. I do not like the vibes of the Toronto Raptors whatsoever. Scotty Barnes is my guy. I'm going to be a Scotty Barnes believer until he's out of the league, but it just looks gross right now. And I think for sure there's one big trade or multiple big trades happening with this group.
Yeah, that's why I have the under. I look at this team and I think what have we been saying about the Raptors for so long is that yeah, this team's good, but they're never going to get over the hump. They're never going to win, and now you lose a guy like Van Vliet. Schroeder is in there, which obviously we'd rather have Van Vliet than Schroeder. You still have Siakam, Scotty Barnes, and it's just the team. I look like that it's never going to get over the hump with this team. So what do you have to do? You sometimes have to make that hard decision, and you got to trade away assets. And they have two assets, OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam, that pretty much every team in the NBA would probably want one of those guys on their team. No one's gonna turn down either of those guys. So I think that they have a couple assets that they could trade, and when you do that, you wanna go to the full rebuild phase. You wanna not necessarily be bad, but you don't want to win a lot of games. You want to see what you can get. So maybe you can get some draft picks. Maybe you can get some assets. Maybe you can get some young players to help build around Scotty Barnes, because I think that's at the end of the day what the Toronto Raptors goal is going to be. So I'm going under 36.5. I don't see a full season of the Raptors just doing it again to just be below average. Why? You're just wasting these players' years at this point. See what you can get. You'll still get good packages for both Siakam and both Anunoby. Do that. So if that's the case, and I think they are going to do that and going to trade those guys, then they're going to go under 36.5. It doesn't matter who they get back. They're not going to be to the level of Siakam and Anunoby. So I have them under. And also, too, Dunny, you touched on it. When you lose a head coach, it's a little different sometimes right off the bat. And especially when you lose a head coach or you have a new head coach, when you have a team that has fallen short, and also it's a team where, these guys are probably not going to be here long term, you're going to want to switch things up. And when you switch things up, you usually don't win right away. So I'll take the under.
Yeah, you guys made a lot of great points and a lot of stuff I was going to touch on. If they're going to blow it up, there's no reason you should try to take an over. And they're, again, on that meter, way more likely to blow it up than to be a playoff team.
Yes.
So just don't overthink it. Like, just this is a team that's going to be I just think they're going to be pretty brutal, especially if they trade Siakam. Like, that they're going to, what do they have going for them, especially compared to, like, when you look at, like, the upside of the bad teams in the East, I'd rather have a lot of the rosters at this point too. They've tried to hold on for a long time, but yeah, I'm going hard under here. Somebody's got to be hard under, and the Raptors are definitely the most likely candidate.
I will say though, and if we want to just use this as the start of my best and worst case scenario, if they somehow get a OG deal done before the season starts, and then trade Siakam at the deadline or something, and because you would think for both those guys they get a pretty sizable return, depending on what teams they're dealing with. I mean, they have a core of Scotty Barnes and whoever else is left over in the trades, and then they're able to bring in a few stars by the deadline, which I don't, it's tough to trade for 2 stars, but I mean, even if they do something lateral to what Brooklyn did, and it's a guy like Mikal Bridges who's still on the rise, but stars in his future, and then some other really good defenders and role players. If they're able to pull something off like that before the deadline, I think that's probably their best case scenario, and maybe they get back into the playoff conversation. Worst case scenario, I think this under smashes, and they're way under 37 wins, and just not even a playoff team, not a play-in team. New head coach is not, a disaster because he's not really left with a whole lot, but it doesn't work, and they wait too long to trade their guys, and it's over before it begins.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to mimic you, but that's kind of exactly what I have for best case, worst case. It's just one of those things where I don't see too much hope for this team, and I'm convinced that this is a team where their best case might be a full rebuild.
The worst case,
right?
That's the best. That's the point. The best case is the worst case. They
exactly.
Get it out of
with
here.
the best case is like rip the Band-Aid off, get these guys out of there, and get a top pick to build around Scotty Barnes, because everyone on this roster at this point is expendable besides Scotty Barnes. And the only reason I love Siakam. You guys know how much I love Siakam, but it's like that you're gonna get a lot for him. What good is he doing just sitting here? Trade them all. I think their worst case is their best case. You're right, Mike. I mean, it's obvious, right? It's like your worst case is your best case. You want to be bad. You want to have a top pick. So just rip the Band-Aid off and trade these guys, because I'm telling you right now, everyone in the league right now, all other 29 other teams would want to have OG Anunoby on their team, would want to have Pascal Siakam on their team. Right, price, obviously. But regardless, these are two guys that everybody would want. Just do it.
Yep.
You're not winning anything with this squad, so that's kind of how I see it.
All right. I can't say anything more than that. They got to blow it up. Best case is the worst case. Send it.
Ceiling's the floor for Toronto.
What a way to
end
it.
That was our Atlantic Division preview. For those who were listening from the beginning, you probably thought we would never stop talking about the Celtics. Or I wouldn't stop talking about the Celtics, but we made it.
I think our longest segment was actually the Sixers.
Oh, that makes me sick to my stomach.
And
I have to go back because I missed it a little bit going through, but I'm pretty. It's either the Sixers. It's either the Sixers or the Knicks, but I think it's the Sixers. So yeah.
So obviously, last year our running bit was how much we talked about the Nets and Ben Simmons and everything that team entailed. I have an early dark horse. This is going to be the 76ers is that team that we are talking about nonstop, whether we want to or not, throughout this season. And I think it's already happened because the last 3 shows we've done to end the summer, a lot of heavy Harden stuff. If the Embiid trade rumors pick up, that's going to be what we're talking about. And then today we couldn't help ourselves but to talk about this team. So get ready for that, Happy Hour Hoops fans. Anything else on this division, boys, before we wrap it up?
Brooklyn Nets are finishing second. That's all I gotta say.
I love that prediction.
I can't get there. I'm sorry. The Knicks. But I did sell myself on my Knicks Celtics conference finals. I think the world needs that.
Fuck yeah.
Knicks, Celtics, and Lakers, Nuggets rematch.
Ooh.
That's what we need. Oh, and that's not my prediction. My prediction is not Knicks Celtics. The Celtics.
That is what we need, though.
Celtics will be there.
I love that.
All
right. You guys heard it. Celtics winning the division. Raptors probably coming in dead last and blowing it up. For Steve, Jake, and myself, follow Trainwreck Sports on all socials. Follow at Happy Hour Hoops 1 on all socials. And we have more division previews coming up right up until the season. Later, guys.